Well, hello everybody, and thank you very much for for inviting me to give this presentation on e-negotiation. I'm going to be talking about a couple of products by smartsettle, a Canadian company, and these are e-negotiation products. Let me just put up my slides, if I may, and share my screen with you. Okay, that's working. Now, if you look at this title, this is what I'm going to be talking about, negotiating the settlement of disputes with AI. And you're looking at that AI, and I would imagine for most, if not all of you, that stands for artificial intelligence. Well, that's not what I'm going to be talking to you about. It's not about that AI. It's about a different AI, augmented intelligence. And there is a huge difference. And I'll try and explain that in explaining and taking you through these two products, smartsettle One and smartsettle Infinity. When I finish this presentation, there'll be a short Q&A. And after that, there'll be a half an hour live walkthrough of both the systems. So I'm going to be explaining them with slides, and afterwards, after the Q&A, you'll all be able to see my colleague, the founder and head of the smartsettle companies, Ernie Thiessen of British Columbia. He is going to be taking you through live role plays of both systems. Now, this is what happens when the other AI goes wrong. And it's important for me to clarify this because many people who I talk to about e-negotiation and thinking in terms of artificial intelligence assume that things are going to go wrong, as they do. We hear all these stories, and that somehow it's not for them, and somehow it demeans the work of lawyers and mediators and negotiators. Far from it. But this is a classic example of the artificial intelligence that goes wrong. I don't know if you can clearly see there. What you're looking at is a large screen, a photograph of a large screen in a town just south of Shanghai in 2018. And on this screen, they would put, the authorities, pictures of people that they catch on the cameras as jaywalking in the street. And here you see a picture of this lady, and they put up her face to shame her because the AI had identified her and was able to identify her name, and it gives her name and her details of who she is. Point of fact, there was a bit of a mistake here, because as you can see in the rest of this picture, there's a bus here. And in fact, this lady, who by the way, was a very senior businesswoman, head of a major air conditioning company in China, and on the Forbes list of 100 best businesswomen in China. And they'd obviously made a mistake with the wrong lady. Her picture happened to be on the side of a bus. Now, the bus, of course, was in the middle of the road, and it incorrectly assumed that this lady was in the middle of the road when there was a bus there and jaywalking. And you can see, therefore, how things can go wrong. But as I said, we're doing something different here. So artificial intelligence is like a hand masquerading as the human that is totally in control. Augmented intelligence is where the technology, on the other hand, gives a helping hand to the human, and the human it is who stays in control. And that's what we're talking about here. Now, when I settled some cases using smartsettle 1 court case in the UK, here's a story from the Financial Times that heads it, "Robots and AI threaten to mediate disputes better than lawyers." And another one, "Robot mediator settles first ever court case." Well, it was nothing like this, and I'm going to show you smartsettle 1, and I hope you'll agree with me that this is something that actually aids the human negotiator, yourselves, to negotiate better. It doesn't take your work over from you. It doesn't impose a settlement. It merely helps you, the negotiator, to be more successful and more efficient. So we're going to go through a role play here now. Imagine this case of a legal cover insurance company that issued business interruption policy, and the PGS law firm has been instructed by the insured because the claim that was originally made for the interruption of the business due to the COVID restrictions was initially challenged by the insurer. So Leo represents the insurer and Tom is the lawyer for the insured. Now, here's the process, first of all, when you start a case in smartsettle 1. Claimant invites the other party to use it. They both agree to use it. Now, they initially then will start to practice on the system. And by the way, after this session, you'll be sent some details, it might be in the next day or two, of how you can, in fact, go on the smartsettle platform and, in fact, have a play around with this system, playing against either the robot, the system itself, or inviting a colleague to use the system. There's no charge for that. Now, once they've practiced, and I should say in the case in court that I dealt with personally, it took less than half an hour for the parties in the case acting themselves, doing the negotiations themselves, to in fact become competent to use it successfully in the case. Now, once they've had the practice, the next step is a draft agreement. A draft heads of agreement is then drawn up with all the terms. There may be some different additional terms or conditions that are to be included, but the only thing that's missing is the amount of money to be paid by way of compensation. And that is left as a blank. The next stage, the bottom to the left, any relevant documents, the policy, any documents that go to prove the damage caused to the claimant can be uploaded to the system. And then one begins to negotiate using what's called visual blind bidding with augmented intelligence. And you'll see why it's called visual blind bidding, which does seem a slight contradiction in terms, but in fact it isn't. And they negotiate until they reach a settlement. And once that takes place, that document, that draft heads of agreement, gets updated with the amount of money that's been agreed. I should add, at the beginning, it's up to the parties whether they want the use of this system when it produces an agreement and a settlement, for that to be binding, or for that to be simply without prejudice for further negotiation to take place on other details. That's entirely the process. But obviously the best way to use it is to make it binding. So the first step now is to prepare what's called the single negotiating framework. And that's that heads of agreement, really, which I've mentioned. In this particular case, the insureds have, in fact, made an initial offer of $49,000, but the claimant is demanding $65,000. So there's a bit of a gap there, but it's not, one would think, insurmountable. And here's an example of the heads of agreement. claimant's business has suffered as a result of COVID. This is covered by a valid business interruption insurance policy. Therefore, the defendant agrees to pay to the claimant a settlement of, now this is blank. It's obviously going to be between 49,000 and 65,000. And here we have the negotiating area. It's a scale. This is as it's seen by Insurco, the insurer, on the right-hand side. And you'll see there at the beginning is 49. This is representing thousands of dollars. And that shows the initial offer of 49,000. Tom is demanding 65 on the left. Now, in point of fact, as you'll come to see when this is played out, there is a zone of possible agreement here, because Insurco's real bottom line they're prepared to go to, top line, is 61,000, whereas Tom's, in fact, is 58. So in this particular case, although neither knows it because they don't know what the bottom lines of the other party is, there is a huge area of agreement somewhere within that zone. Now, I should add that as well as this negotiating area here, the scale, there's also provision for conversation. Asynchronous text messages can be exchanged between the parties here. If this is considered too narrow or too short for messages, at any stage you could press this button here and it'll expand it to full, more complete screen. So the negotiations take place in sessions. Here you'll see Insurco has made an opening offer with a green tab to 50,000. That one is actually seen by Tom. He can see this opening offer, as indeed Tom and Insurco, and we're looking from Insurco's point, can see an open offer, a demand reducing his 65,000 to 64,000. Now, those are the visual offers, the normal way in which you make offers. You put it forward. The important area is this lower section where there is a yellow flag, and this has been moved to 53. Now, this is the secret blind bid of Insurco. The insurer has been prepared to increase the offer to 53, but he doesn't want to declare it openly to Tom. He doesn't see that. Tom, however, has made a secret further reduction down to 63,000. It's shown here in gray, but really, if we're looking at it from Tom's perspective, he will see it as Insurco does, with a green and a yellow. So just bear with me. We're showing the gray line here of Tom's secret bids so you can see how it operates. So in reality, they've actually got a gap of 10,000. And that session ends without agreement. They now move on to the next session. And you see the movements being made here. An open offer has been reduced further, increased further to 50, from the insurer to 52, and Tom's to 63. However, Insurco has made a huge secret bid up to 59. It's within the range as far as they're prepared to go. It's a little bit less than that. It's not their bottom line, but it's reduced significantly the gap with the secret bids, because Tom is now at 62. So there's only now a gap of $3,000. In fact, now in the third session, Insurco has increased to 61 secret. And look what's happened here. There's been an overlap. they've really gone to the, not quite to the bottom lines, but almost. And there's a gap of 58 to 61, 3,000. And the system has now revealed a settlement at $59,000. The question is, how did it decide where in this overlap of the secret bids, Encirca was prepared to go to 61,000 and Tom was prepared to go down to 58. One could have resolved this gap or this overlap by simply splitting it down the middle at 59,500. However, if you think about it, splitting down the middle just rewards the party that holds back. It also reveals the last secret bid because you just double the difference from your last secret bid. One doesn't do that. One wants to reward and give an incentive to the party that makes more effort. And what it actually does is it looks at the party that went into the zone of possible agreement, the overlap, first. And that will be the person who then has made the smallest last move. This particular case, it was Encirca for moving there earlier, so that the overlap is divided 1 to 2 in Encirca's favor. So instead of splitting down the middle to 59.5, it reveals a settlement at 59,000, saving £500 to Encirca. In any of these numbers were acceptable to both parties, because don't forget, Tom had been prepared to drop down to 58. So he gets 1,000 more. And as Encirca were prepared to go to 61, they managed to save $2,000. So instead of settling at 59.5, it settles at 59. And this heads of agreement now has the figure 59,000 automatically inserted into it to be printed out. Now, you might say, well, okay, that's fine where secret bids overlap. What if they don't? Well, that's when some other algorithms come into play. When you make a secret bid, a pop-up comes up on screen to ask whether you'd be prepared to go a little bit further if and only if it would enable a deal to be reached. And here you'll see it asks the question, and this comes up every time you make a bid. If a small gap remains, do you agree to divide it by the rewarding early effort algorithm? Here he said yes, in which case it then asks to what extent can it be increased, and here said $2,000. And this is asked of both sides. Now, if these extensions both would reach the other party, then the under gap, if you like, again here, £3,000, is again rewarded to the party that made more effort. In this particular case, so it rewards that to Tom. At 61. So that was the way it briefly works. Difficult to take it all. If it's difficult to get it in, remember you'll be able to go online and indeed after here there's a half an hour session for both the systems, because I'm going to now, and you'll be able to practice and see. What I like about these systems is it does encourage and nudge both sides to not sit on offers, but to continually try to settle, and rewards the party that makes more effort. It also puts a stop to the negotiating dance where you sit on bids out of that you don't really go quickly to your maximum that you're prepared to offer. And the parties that do that get rewarded. I should add that what you're looking at here is an extra facility for organizations with large volumes of claims, obviously insurance companies, whether legal protection or not, to input offers in cases in advance of the negotiation. So this is useful for less experienced claims handlers who can be guided because without having to wait. Should add that when you go on the system, I explained about the chat box, the box for chat between the parties, but the system can also be used by mediators. When a mediator is involved, he can talk privately on these side boxes with each side, as well as talking to both of them. So much of the normal mediation discussion, when it's done by text like this, can be done on the system above the negotiating slider. An important point about this is also that at any stage, you can reverse the bid. So that yellow slider, instead, it doesn't have to always go forward. You can raise it backwards. You may think, well, what's the point of that? Well, this gives insurers an opportunity to try and settle a case early before costs build up. In the knowledge that if they settle slightly higher than they would normally, but that high offer attracts and reaches a settlement, they know that the costs on top of that, if it is done, will be much lower. And so settling high with low costs, when you total together, may be much less than settling lower, but much further down the line when costs are higher. So that power to reverse the bill is extremely important. You may want to try out a settlement, but if that high bid doesn't reach the settlement, you can always bring it back to more realistic figures. No damage is done. You may be interested to know what the costs are. Well, really, there's nothing to lose on this because smartsettle will allow you to open live cases on the system at no charge, except that if the case does resolve on the system, the parties jointly will pay 2% of the negotiating range, and you can agree yourselves how to divide that. If, in fact, your company is interested in having something linking into your own case management systems and to have a branded system, then this can be provided, but at a price on application. So here are the key takeaways about smartsettle. It's a standalone software as a service, and it can be used together with any system of negotiation or ADR or ODR. Includes telephone and in-person mediations. So it doesn't change the way you do your work. It enables negotiations to be improved by the process combining open and secret efforts. It's important to note that no settlement is ever declared except in a figure within the specified bidding of each party. So it's not the computer telling you what the settlement is, and it's constantly nudging the parties, and it rewards the parties that make more effort. Now I'm going to show you Infinity. This is a much more complex system. It's appropriate for, it handles multiple parties and also multiple issues to negotiate. And this is appropriate where it's not just one number that you're negotiating on, amount of money, but there are a number of issues, and a settlement would be a package of issues. Now here we're looking at what it looks like in a case, a business-to-business dispute in the supply chain. So imagine a company has